Hello, Psych 100 students, and welcome to our Subliminal Perception short lecture. We're just going to take a few minutes to sort of explain what subliminal perception is. Really, to put it in a nutshell, subliminal perception is perceiving a stimulus outside of your awareness. In other words, it's the idea that some type of stimulus can affect our behavior when it's subtle or brief, or in other words, we don't perceive it consciously. So can these messages be detected by the brain outside of our awareness? So what we're going to do is look at some research to kind of set the record straight here. Turns out there's a lot of misconceptions about this. Let's take a look at our research. We're going to start off sort of discussing what we think it cannot do contrary to popular belief. So what subliminal perception cannot do according to the research? Number one, it does not affect consumer behavior. In other words, if we expose subjects to a subliminal message directing them to purchase a product or change their behavior in this sense, we have found that it does not hold up. For example, let's say you're at the movie theater, and in between the trailers at the beginning of the show, they flash on the screen a message which says, "Buy Coke." This message is flashed so quickly that you don't remember seeing it. We're talking a fraction of a second. And yet at some level, you may have detected it, is what they're saying. Would you actually be more likely to go to the concession stand and buy a soda or some similar product? We're finding the answer is no. So they've done this with subjects. They've discovered that it does not affect their behavior in terms of buying products. Okay, what if we expose you to some type of evil message directing you to do something unthinkable? Would this person be influenced to do that? Remember, we're saying subliminally we've exposed them to some type of message. Once again, the research is saying no. As an example, back in the 70s, so this is before most of your time, a lot of these rock stars were putting these backwards messages in their songs. So backward messages. So in other words, you listen to the song forward, but it's really playing the message backwards, and thus it makes it subliminal. The famous rumor was Led Zeppelin, one of the most famous rock bands of all time, in my opinion, one of the greatest. In their song Stairway to Heaven, there was a section, supposedly, where they would put some kind of message in there in the lyrics where it would be played backwards, and yet at some level that you would be able to hear it. So you hear about all these rumors that bands were doing this and advertisers and so forth, but once again, when we actually researched this stuff, we found that it is simply not true. Okay, so what about those self-help tapes? In other words, you buy this audio recording that it supposedly helps you to lose weight or quit smoking because you're exposed to subliminal messages. So the book talks about a study where they obtained 2 of these recordings. The first recording supposedly helped improve your self-esteem. And the second video, these manufacturers claimed that it would improve your memory. So the psychologist got a hold of both of these recordings, and it's very important to understand that they actually switched the labels on these recordings and had subjects listen to those. So one group listened to the self-esteem, one group listened to the memory. After a period of time, whatever was recommended in terms of listening to that, they then measured the subjects, and what do you know? The self-esteem group showed an improvement as well as the memory group in memory. The problem is that because the labels were switched, they were actually listening to the wrong tape, but they found gains in areas where the label said they should. So what we think is happening with these recordings is that we think it's more due to your expectations. Because this recording says it's going to improve your memory, and you've invested in it, you've purchased this and spent money, we think that because of those strong expectations, it may be guiding the subject in that direction. So in other words, they may work, but we don't think it's due to subliminal messages. We think it's more due to the expectations of the subject. So the book gives a great description of that particular study. Make sure you check that out. Next, we're going to go to what it can do. So we do have some evidence that there are subtle effects on responding. So keep in mind they are small, and the research studies are mixed, but we do see some effects. So the book does cover this, but I'm just going to give you one study here, where in this particular experiment, they sat people in front of a computer screen or something and exposed them to words subliminally. In other words, the words may have been flashed very quickly to the point where the person did not remember seeing anything, but theoretically, subliminally, they detected it. So one of the words happened to be tree. After they were exposed to those words, they then gave them what we call word stems, which is like a little worksheet, and they had to fill in the blank. So they asked the subject, okay, what is the first word that comes to mind that starts with L? What do you know? The number one response was leaf. So in other words, of all the L words they could have come up with, they came up with a word directly tied to one of the words they were exposed to. So they're saying that may be evidence that subliminally they did detect the word tree and it influenced their thinking and guided them to think of the word leaf. So I will let you make up your mind if you agree if that is evidence of subliminal perception. Remember, not every study shows this, so that makes me kind of skeptical. And the ones that do show effects, they tend to be very small, if anything. So it appears that there is some research, but it is pretty weak. All right, so this will conclude our short lecture on subliminal perception. Please go on to the next video or step in the process.